Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Thursday, January 4th, 2024. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. The U.S. and allies threaten the Houthis over Red Sea attacks. So the U.S. and some of its allies released a joint statement on Wednesday threatening Yemen's Houthis, who are officially known as Ansar Allah, over their attacks on Israeli-linked shipping in the Red Sea, which started in response to the brutal Israeli assault on Gaza. So this statement reads, quote, "Let our message now be clear. We call for the immediate end of these illegal attacks and release of unlawfully detained vessels and crews. The Houthis will bear the responsibility of the consequences should they continue to threaten lives, the global economy, and free flow of commerce in the region's critical waterways," end quote. So this statement was issued by the U.S., the U.K., New Zealand, the Netherlands, Japan, Germany, Italy, Denmark, Canada, Belgium, Australia, and Bahrain. And Bahrain is the only Arab nation, the only regional country to sign on to this. And Bahrain's not on the Red Sea, but, the only country in the region there. So the Times of London previously reported that the U.S. and the U.K. were working on a joint statement that would threaten action against the Houthis if they didn't stop the Red Sea attacks. And the way that report portrayed it was that it would be kind of the Houthis' last chance before they really hit them hard. And sources told the paper that options being considered by the U.S. and the U.K. were direct airstrikes on Yemen or using special operations forces to target Houthi boats. The U.S. has already sank a few Houthi boats, killing 10 of their naval personnel, and that was in an incident on Sunday. So things are really heating up, and the Houthis are continuing attacks on the commercial shipping linked to Israel. Doesn't seem like they're going to back down. So if they go through with this, if they bomb Yemen, that's going to be a huge escalation, risk the shattering the fragile peace that's been held in Yemen between the Houthis and the U.S.-backed Saudi coalition, and that's held pretty well since April 2022, so almost 2 years now. But who knows what could happen if the U.S. starts bombing the Houthis. Notably, Saudi Arabia is not involved in any of this. I think they're worried that they want to send the signal to the Houthis that they are not going to be involved because they don't want the Houthis to start targeting their oil fields again, their oil infrastructure again. The Houthis got very good at hitting their oil facilities during that long, brutal war. So anyway, and that also means if the U.S. starts bombing them directly, the Houthis could start. They have long-range missiles and drones. They could start trying to hit the U.S. in different places. Who knows how this thing could escalate? And again, the Houthis have vowed not to back down. They have repeatedly stated that they will continue the attacks on Israeli-linked commercial shipping. They will continue firing missiles and drones at Israel as long as the siege in Gaza continues. So they say the only way to end it is for a ceasefire in Gaza, for Israel to lift the siege. And the Biden administration has shown no interest in that, shown no interest in using the leverage that they have over Israel, which is a whole lot of leverage considering how reliant Israel is on military aid to keep this war going, this slaughter in Gaza going. But the U.S. is instead continuing to provide unconditional aid and opting for regional escalation instead of cutting off Israel. Anything for Israel. All right, so the next one here. Iran vows harsh response for bombing that killed over 100 Iranians. So there's a huge bombing in Iran on Wednesday, and it targeted the southeastern city of Kerman. And January 3rd was the 4th anniversary of the U.S. drone strike in Baghdad that killed Qasem Soleimani. He was the Iranian general in charge of the IRGC's Quds Force. And the Quds Force is known as kind of leading the Iranian, axis of resistance, as they call it in the region. And he was very involved in the war against ISIS. The U.S. and Soleimani were on the same side in that war. And then they turned around. The U.S. didn't want to leave after that. And so anyway, it was during this commemoration forum that this bombing occurred. And at least 103 people were killed, including women and children. So Iranian officials said that 2 separate bombs were placed in bags on the side of the road, leading to a cemetery where a large crowd of people was heading to. And the Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said in a statement on the bombing, quote, "The evil and criminal enemies of the Iranian nation once again created a disaster and martyred a large number of dear people in Kerman. This disaster will have a harsh response, God willing," end quote. So Iran has not yet formally, officially attributed blame for this bombing. Israel is certainly a prime suspect because Israel has a history of carrying out attacks inside Iran, including sabotage attacks at nuclear facilities, which usually involve some sort of explosion, targeted assassinations of Iranian nuclear scientists. IRGC officers have also been gunned down in Iran in Israeli assassination plots. And they've also conducted drone attacks with kind of small, kamikaze drones against facilities in Iran. But they haven't, this is a huge bombing. This is far beyond anything Israel has done before in Iran. And there's also another suspect is the MEK, which is a exiled Iranian cult, basically, that they're based in Albania. And they have been involved in some of the Israeli operations inside Iran because they have assets in the country. But we'll see. And as I've been covering, Israel, especially Netanyahu, they have the incentive to, it looks like they're trying to provoke a regional war to get the U.S. dragged into it. That's what it seems like they're doing with that drone strike in Beirut. They killed an IRGC commander in Syria recently. So they've really been, bombing Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, of course. There's stuff happening all over the place. So the U.S. officials are pointing to ISIS as a potential culprit, and ISIS has carried out attacks inside Iran in recent years. So that's a possibility. And they were also an enemy, a sworn enemy of Soleimani. So the Iranian mission to the UN hinted that Israel could have been responsible in a post on X. The mission said, quote, "The fear of the Zionist regime and its puppet terrorist groups of martyr Soleimani led to another crime in Kerman during his commemoration ceremony. Iran will respond with fire and fury to the orchestrators, perpetrators, and anyone who's aided and abetted in this terrorist attack," end quote. And Iran's ambassador to the UN said in a letter to top UN officials that a comprehensive investigation was underway to find out who the perpetrators are. And I know from following this stuff for a while now, some of these Israeli attacks that you see happen in Iran, Israel doesn't officially take credit. An attack will happen, and Iran usually won't immediately blame Israel. They usually wait a little while, and then they come out and formally accuse Israel. And so, if it was Israel, it's just huge. But, we don't know for sure if it was. But like I said, I think they are the prime suspect, considering the timing and everything else that's happening. All right, so the next one here, the White House says that nobody should shed a tear for al-Arouri, and this is the Hamas official that Israel just killed. So the White House on Wednesday gave tacit backing to the Israeli drone strike in Beirut that killed Salah al-Arouri, the deputy chief of Hamas's Politico Bureau. And they gave this tacit support despite the risk of this action provoking a major war. This is really unbelievable, the U.S. reaction to this. U.S. and Israeli officials speaking anonymously to the media have confirmed that Israel was behind the strike, but they have not done so publicly, so they're still feigning ignorance. The White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby claimed that the U.S. did not know if Israel was behind the strike, but justified the bombing of the Lebanese capital. Kirby said, quote, "We're not in a position to confirm the specific reports. I would just tell you that al-Arouri was a noted designated global terrorist, and if he is in fact dead, nobody should be shedding a tear over his loss," end quote. The State Department also appeared to express its support for the killing of al-Arouri while claiming ignorance on who was responsible. State Department spokesman Matt Miller called al-Arouri, quote, "a brutal terrorist centrally responsible for the attacks on October 7th and other attacks against innocent civilians going back well beforehand," end quote. Al-Arouri was involved in the Qatari-mediated negotiations that led to the hostage deal that freed over 100 Israelis and over 200 Palestinians. There are unconfirmed reports that say Hamas has suspended the negotiations with Israel that were mediated by Qatar and Egypt that just recently resumed. That's not, I don't know for sure if those talks are suspended. I wouldn't be surprised if they are, but we'll see if more comes out about that. But Hezbollah is warning that it will respond to the assassination, which marked the first Israeli attack on Beirut since the 2006 Lebanon war. And that's what this next story is about. Hezbollah's Nasrallah says al-Arouri killing will not go unpunished. So Nasrallah had a speech scheduled for Wednesday, and it was to commemorate Soleimani being killed. And basically, I'll just read the quote from him about, the Hezbollah's potential response to the bombing in Beirut. He said, quote, "We do not need to say much, and just like we said in our official statement yesterday, this serious crime will not go unanswered or unpunished. The battlefield is there, time is there, the nights wait for us all, and I will see you again," end quote. So that's kind of what he said about that. So we'll see how Hezbollah responds. There's been a lot of intense fire, it's not like I don't want to downplay what's been happening between Hezbollah and Israel, because hundreds of people have been killed. And if you live in southern Lebanon or North Israel, that region is, to you, is at war. But still haven't seen anything huge, from Hezbollah since the Beirut drone strike. All right, so the next one here, ethnic cleansing is becoming official Israeli policy. So the idea of cleansing Gaza of its Palestinian population is slowly becoming an official Israeli government position. And this was reported by Zeman Israel, which is the Hebrew sister site of the Times of Israel. And a senior Israeli official said that Israel is already in discussions with Congo, the African nation, and other countries on absorbing Palestinian refugees. The official said, quote, "Congo will be willing to take in migrants, and we're in talks with others," end quote. Israeli officials are framing this plan as voluntary resettlement, but the Israeli military is making Gaza uninhabitable. Besides the massive bombing campaign, that's destroyed nearly 70% of the homes in Gaza, which is just a huge number. But the siege has also, they're also starving the Palestinians. Disease is spreading. They're doing everything they can to make their lives as miserable as possible. The report came a day after the U.S. condemned rhetoric from Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, who are two ministers in the Israeli government with lots of power, considered extremists in Israeli politics, but they're part of the government and their views are popular when it comes to this issue. Within the Israeli government, the U.S. is kind of pretending like it's just these two guys that are crazy. But Netanyahu has said he's working on finding countries to absorb Palestinians. He said that just last week. And on Tuesday, Israel's intelligence minister, Gila Gamliel, told Zeman that, quote, "Voluntary migration is the best and most realistic program for the day after the fighting ends," end quote. So that's Israel's intelligence minister, and she's in the Likud party. She also penned an op-ed for the Jerusalem Post in November, touting this idea, this plan. And there was two members of the Israeli Knesset that did that in the Wall Street Journal, saying Western countries should accept Palestinian refugees. So again, this is, and these were one Likud member and one member of Yesh Atid, which is the main opposition party. So it's across the political spectrum. And it was obvious from the start that ethnic cleansing is the Israeli goal. There was that leaked Israeli intelligence ministry document that was drafted in October, not long after October 7th, that said the best outcome of this is for all of the Palestinians in Gaza, all 2.3 million of them, to be expelled into Egypt. All of them, and then to establish a buffer zone. But Egypt is not having that, so now these Israeli officials are looking elsewhere. But it's clear that that's the plan, that's what they want to do. So all this rhetoric from the U.S. is just kind of to deflect and distract and act like they care, when in reality they don't, or they support this because they're giving Israel all these weapons and other military support. All right, so the next one here, Biden appointee resigns over president's support for Israel. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. In an open letter announcing his resignation, a senior education department official slammed President Joe Biden for supporting Israel's war in Gaza. So his name is Tariq Habash. He was the special assistant in the Education Department's Office of Planning. He announced his resignation on Wednesday. And he's a political appointee, which is interesting. You know, he's not lower level who works within the department. He's a political appointee. And he explained how he campaigned for Biden during 2020. He said in his letter, quote, "I cannot stay silent as this administration turns a blind eye to the atrocities committed against innocent Palestinian lives in what leading human rights experts have called a genocidal campaign by the Israeli government," end quote. So more dissent from within the Biden administration. And this guy is Palestinian American. All right, so the next one here, Russia, Ukraine, and the UAE, they did a prisoner swap that was brokered by the UAE. So Russia and Ukraine on Wednesday announced their largest prisoner swap of the conflict in a deal that was brokered by the UAE. Zelensky said that 230 Ukrainians were freed in the deal, including 213 soldiers, 11 officers, and 6 civilians. Russian media reported that 248 Russian service members were released from Ukrainian captivity, and the UAE's foreign ministry said that the deal was able to be reached thanks to its friendly ties with both nations. When countries are neutral, they are able to do things like mediate prisoner swaps, mediate and host peace talks. So the prisoner exchange comes as, tensions are very high between Russia and Ukraine right now. We've seen this uptick in Russian strikes on Ukraine, and then the big Ukrainian missile attack in Belgrade, and Putin saying he's going to intensify the strikes even more. And, I haven't really been talking about it. I probably should try to pay attention to it more. Fighting has been, it's not like the war, the fighting on the ground isn't happening. It's been going on along the front, this whole time. People are being, soldiers are dying. And it looks like Russia's starting to make some incremental gains right now, but, not much territory has changed hands over the past year as they're really dug in. So, it's just, it's still going on. But this is maybe a sign that some more diplomacy could happen. This is, again, their biggest prisoner swap of the war. So hopefully this leads to more talks, more exchanges, more things like this. All right, so the next one here, only a very small number of Leopard 2 tanks are left in Ukraine. So this article is from Kyle again at the Libertarian Institute. A German official said a very small number of modern German battle tanks are still operating in Ukraine. The politician called on the German manufacturing industry to produce more parts to make repairs. Kiev's backers have depleted their arms stockpiles and are now struggling to find enough weapons to keep the Ukrainian military fighting. So these are the Leopard 2 tanks that Germany has provided Ukraine. I know when the counteroffensive first kicked off, Ukraine tried to make a big armored push, but they lost a lot of tanks and other armored vehicles. So this is a member of Germany's Green Party, and he said, quote, "Only a few of the modern Leopard 2 tanks supplied by Germany to Ukraine are still being deployed in the war, largely because spare parts for repairs are lacking, according to a defense budget decision maker in Germany's parliament." Sorry, that was actually a quote from Business Insider, not from that guy. But that's what that guy is saying. So, it's just another sign that, these Western countries are, especially the European countries, they're just out of things to send to Ukraine, and they're saying they have to ramp up all this production. And it just shows that time is on Russia's side when it comes to all this. All right, the next one here, it's state propaganda. Ukrainians shun TV news as war drags on. So this article is from the New York Times, and it is about the Ukrainian state television. If you remember, right after the Russian invasion, Zelensky declared martial law. He nationalized the TV media, so the only news you could watch is state-controlled. And I'll just summarize this article from what I read. Basically, it's saying that the Ukrainians are getting fed up because this news channel, the Telemarathon United News, is basically just painting this picture that's not true of the war, trying to spin, put a positive spin on it when it's clearly not going well. And it shows videos of, Ukrainian success on the battlefield and stuff. And it's just, state propaganda is how Ukrainians feel about it. It says people, liked it at first, but now as things have dragged on and so many Ukrainians have been killed and there's no victory in sight, they are, losing viewers, this state media television show. All right. So the next story here, House bill calls for the U.S. to free Julian Assange. So this is some goodish news here. So I kind of missed this. There was a resolution introduced in the House last month that calls for the U.S. to drop the charges against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, who faces up to 175 years in prison if extradited to the U.S. and convicted for journalism that exposed American war crimes. So I actually did see this bill like a week or two ago, but I thought because it was the end of the year that it would be a dead bill come 2024, but it's not a new Congress this year. So this bill is still active, which is really good. So this bill was introduced by Representative Paul Gosar, Republican from Arizona, and it says, it expresses, quote, the sense of the House of Representatives that regular journalistic activities, including the obtainment and publication of information, are protected under the First Amendment, and that the federal government should drop all charges against and attempts to extradite Julian Assange, end quote. So it's basically a declaration, it expresses that this is what the House of Representatives believe. So it's, it wouldn't force Biden to do something, but I think it could be a big deal if it does get passed. Now, so far, you have Gosar who introduced it and 8 co-sponsors. It's mostly Republicans, which is interesting. I'll read the list of co-sponsors at the end here. But Assange, he's been held in Belmarsh prison in London since 2019. So it's going to be 5 years come this spring that he's been in Belmarsh. But in February, on the 20th and the 21st, he has a hearing scheduled at the UK High Court to appeal his extradition. And his legal team and his wife say it's probably his last chance. It's his final appeal to avoid getting extradited to the U.S. and put on trial. So ahead of the hearing, WikiLeaks and Assange supporters are urging Americans to contact their House representatives and urge them to support Gosar's resolution. So I think we should all call our representative. And I have the link there where you could find your representative if you're not sure. It's very easy. You could just Google it, put in your zip code. You could easily find your House rep. There's also the House or Capitol switchboard operator number. And tell them to support the bill. It's called HRES 934. Tell them to support this bill to protect the First Amendment and press freedom in this country because, like this bill says, what Assange did was standard journalistic practice. He obtained information from a source and he published it, and it was for the public good, and that's what they want to lock him up for. So it would set a very, very dangerous precedent. So the resolution has 8 co-sponsors: James McGovern, who's a Democrat from Massachusetts; Thomas Massie, Republican from Kentucky; Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican from Georgia; Anna Paulina Luna, Republican from Florida; Eric Burleson, Republican from Missouri; Jeff Duncan, Republican from South Carolina; Ilhan Omar, Democrat from Minnesota; and Clay Higgins, Republican from Louisiana. So only 2 Democrats and and then 7 if you include Gosar, are Republicans. So I would say the people kind of to target here are the Democrats, because there were some letters from like the Squad type progressives. I forget exactly what the group, but it was led by Rashida Tlaib. They put in a letter to, I think, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, telling them to drop the charges against Assange. So if you live in her district, I think this is something, you could probably get her to co-sponsor, or other members, progressives. I think maybe some other Republicans would join in on this. So I think it's definitely worth calling, and let me know if you call. It's something we could do. I'm always giving the news and it's just bad, but here's something easily, that's easy that we could do to just kind of voice our opinion about something if you're in the US, which most of you are. So anyway, call your rep and let me know, leave a comment or write me a message or something that you did. And then do it again. I don't know. Not right away, but I think this is something we could kind of keep up until the hearing at least. All right, so I'll probably leave that story up for a few days through the weekend so people see it. All right, so the last one here, the U.S. and South Korea simulate killing Kim Jong-un. So this is another one from Kyle. A top South Korean defense official said Washington and Seoul have considered assassinating the North Korean leader. Not provocative at all, right? So basically what they're doing is they're simulating what they call decapitation drills, which are simulations of taking out Kim Jong-un. And this is something that the U.S. and South Korea used to do. They suspended it in 2017, and they restarted them in 2022, according to a report from the Daily Beast. And that basically said they restarted these drills, but they never talk about them publicly because it's so provocative to basically say that they are practicing killing Kim. But here we have the South Korea's defense minister actually mentioned it publicly, and these comments were made last month. But this is something that didn't get much attention. That when you see all these headlines about North Korea, this is pretty crucial context. That these are the type of provocative drills the U.S. and South Korea are doing. So the South Korean defense minister Shin Won-sik said, "Quote: While it is difficult to openly discuss decapitation, the ROK U.S. Special Operations Forces are conducting training. This training is for aerial maneuvers, raids on key facilities, and indoor mop-up," end quote. So tensions still remain very high on the Korean Peninsula. I haven't been doing the best job of keeping an eye on that. Same thing with Asia in general. I mean, I really wanted to try to focus on China and Taiwan, but I've been kind of neglecting that area. Taiwan's elections are coming up. In I think January 13th they're going to be held, and that's going to be big. If the DPP, the current ruling party in Taiwan that's more independence leaning and wants all this military support from the U.S., if they win again, we're going to continue on the same trajectory. If they lose, but it looks like they're going to win. But if they did lose, it could really change things. But if they win, it could embolden them, and just the U.S. might do more till we provoke another war over there. That's it for the news for today. Please go check out our Viewpoints, Smashing the Iran Myth from Houthi to Hezbollah by Ted Snyder. That's an important article about how these groups do not, operate independently, especially the Houthis. The Houthis, there's some good stuff in there showing how they're not an Iranian proxy. One from Jeffrey Sachs, Saving Israel by Ending Its War in Gaza. One from Brandon P. Buck, Shifting the Burden, Patterns in U.S. Military Deaths from World War II to the Terror Wars. One from Edward Lazansky, Ukrainian Tragedy Might Escalate into Armageddon. And one from Brad Pierce, American Soldiers Are Being Put in Danger for Israel. So again, that's it for me. Call your House representative about Assange and let me know if you did that. You could also support this show just by sharing it, liking, subscribing. YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble, wherever you watch. If you listen to the audio version, which most of you do, you can leave reviews. And again, just share it. Tell your friends about antiwar.com and what we do over here. Anyway, I'll be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.